I am about to show you a miraculous transformation of this little tray that I got at half price day for just $1. Stick around. Okay guys, I am going to take this tray that the finish is wearing off, and I'm going to take some Waverly Ivory paint that Walmart had to relabel. I guess they lost a label on it. And then I'm going to take some of this apple barrel paint. It is English Ivy Green. And this little plastic deer I actually got at Dollar Tree. They were ornaments and there were 2 of them. I already used one on a different project, which is fine because I only need one for this project. The next item I'm going to use is some Decoupage rice paper that I bought on Etsy. I will put a link to the shop down in the bottom in the description area, so be sure you check that out because this is a beautiful print and I have used it for many projects. It's a pretty good size sheet and there are several projects on it and I just love the look of it. So check that Etsy shop out. They have some really great decoupage patterns. Alright, my next step here is to get these stickers off, and I like to use alcohol and just a razor scraper. So I'll pour a little alcohol on the label if you can do that on the product. If not, just put a little bit on a paper towel. Just take your razor blade and just scrape it off, and you can go back and scrape any of the adhesive off that's left behind. Then I wipe the whole thing down with alcohol just to get all that grit and dirt off of it so the paint will stick to it. After the tray is all cleaned and dry, I will apply my first coat of paint. So I'm going to use Waverly chalk paint in the color of ivory, and I'm using a foam paintbrush because I'm hoping I don't get all those streaks in there that you normally get with a bristle brush. I know I'm still going to have some, and I'm probably just being really hopeful, but the less I have, the better. And I may even have to sand it a little bit just to give it a little bit of a smoother look. But the decoupage paper is going to go over the top of a lot of this, so that's going to help knock down on those streaks. Next, I'm going to take a hair dryer and I'm going to speed up the drying process. Now, I keep a hair dryer. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have this blow dryer that I use only for crafts. It stays right next to my crafting table. It's plugged in, so it's easy accessible all the time. Do you do this? I'm telling you, I bought this blow dryer on Amazon for just $10. I'll actually put a link to it in the description. The head folds down. It's not a retractable cord because I hate having to deal with those retractable cords because they don't always go back in quickly the way you want them to, and it just takes up my time that I could be using on crafts. Unfortunately, I just have a low tolerance to things like that. So now I apply my second coat. There are some streaks in the paint. I think I'll probably have to apply a third coat, but I am going to have to sand it to get all those streaks out. But I do know that if you take your paintbrush and you dab on it, on the area a little bit, that helps get rid of those streaks and also will help thicken that paint so that you don't have to put as many coats on. Just kind of helps cover those areas that are hard to cover. Once I finish with the second coat, I'm going to use a hair dryer and dry it to speed up that drying process again. As I'm drying the tray, I notice some spots that I missed, so I come back in with the paintbrush and cover those up. It's pretty common for me to miss some spots. I don't know about you. Do you have that problem? Do you have to go back and kind of do some touch-ups? As I run the blow dryer over it, it's easy for me to spot those, so it's a great time to do the touch-ups. Okay, now I've got it all painted and I've even got my little symbol stamped on the back. I started painting one of the handles when it dawned on me that it was probably better if I taped off the rest of the tray because I knew I was going to have to do touch-ups, but I didn't want to do a whole lot of touch-ups. So I ended up putting the blue tape just around the handles just to try to keep it from getting on the tray as much as possible. Now this is up to you. Some people rather just paint it and then go back over the paint job that they did and fix all the mistakes, but I make way too many mistakes. I'm a little sloppy. I'm not one of those neat crafters, so it's easier for me to tape it off and do as little repainting as possible. Now that I've got it all taped, I'm going to take the apple barrel paint. The color is the English Ivy Green. It's an acrylic paint, and I'm going to just brush over the handles. Now this time I'm using a bristle brush and I'm using a smaller one so I can get into all the details and stuff. After I get it painted over, I will take a wet paper towel and I will wipe it back because I've already painted the handles with the ivory paint, the ivory chalk paint, and I'm putting the green over the top of it. If I wipe it back, it gives it kind of an aged look. I really like that look. Now, if you don't like that aged look, you can just leave the paint on. Just paint it and leave it on, let it dry just like it is. But I'm wiping my back. I really like that look. Now I'm going to come back later and I'm going to do some more aging. Now that I've got both handles painted green, I'm removing the tape from both sides, and now is when I will be doing all the touch-up paints. Wherever I got the green onto the ivory, I will have to touch up the ivory paint. After the ivory paint is touched up, then I'm going to go in with the blow dryer and I'm going to speed up the drying process. Okay, now that we're done with all the painting, now it's time to put on the decoupage rice paper. So first thing I'm going to do is decide exactly which of the pictures that I want. And this is the one I chose. Mainly, I just want the tree. So right now, I'm only cutting out the tree. I'm not trimming too close to the tree because I want to leave a little bit of extra paper so that I can age it, because I want this to look like it has been here for a long time, this picture or design, and it is slowly starting to just wear away. Okay, once I laid down the decoupage paper, the tree just seemed a little too big to me. I didn't want it to, I don't know, I just didn't want it to consume the platter. I wanted it to pretty much just look like the tree was all that was left on the inside and there was just like, you know, bits of paper elsewhere. So I cut it down before I glued it on. I think that looks much better. Don't you agree? Doesn't that look better? So now I'm going to take some Mod Podge and I'm going to do it where I just start at the top and work my way down because it's smoother that way for me. And also I have learned that if you put on a light amount of Mod Podge, it will still stick because this paper is really thin. It's going to stick really well. You won't get all those wrinkles and bubbles because that's what causes them, especially the bubbles, is there's big old blotches underneath your paper of the Mod Podge that's caused those bubbles. So let's put it on really thin. It will work out so much better if you do. Okay, now I'm taking some 220 grit sandpaper and I'm just going along the edge of it, just kind of roughing it up. And I do it while the Mod Podge is wet because I think it peels it away and just gives it more of an old look than when it's dry and you're just sanding it and you're just kind of getting the straight, rough edge. This gives that pull back where it looks like it's been peeling off for years. And that's what I want, and that's what I think will look really good on this tray. Now that I've got it looking pretty good, kind of the way I want it to look, I'm going to cut out some more pieces and add them in. Now I'm just going to cut out little pieces, just little sections, because I want it to look like at one time the whole center of the tray was covered with this picture, but as time has gone through, it has wore off and there's just little bits of it left. This is when you go in and use those little scrap pieces you have left over, and why you should always keep them, because you never know when you just want one of those little tiny pieces to add into your picture, or even to fill in, say that you were putting down your Mod Podge and your rice paper and you end up ripping it or something, it kind of pulls apart. Sometimes you can just take a little piece and add in there and you can't even tell the difference. What I'm really trying to say here is I actually saved these for my mistakes. Sorry, my head is in the camera here. I didn't know that I got my head stuck in there. I apologize. Now there's no real special way that I am cheesing these. Like I said, you can just use scraps, but I am trying to match them up a little bit because even though I want these to look like, you know, over time they've just wore off, I do want them to fit on there and make it look like it was whole at one time. So basically, it's like putting a puzzle together. There are some pieces that will be missing, but you still want original pieces up there so you can tell that at one time it was a whole picture. So that's what I'm trying to go with right now. That's why I'm lining these up like this, to get the words to all look like they, you know, they work together. Like I said, like a full puzzle at one time. Now, if you'd rather have kind of a collage look, then by all means, do like I said before, take all your scraps from a different project and stick them up there and just get this collage look, which will still be really cool. So again, it's different strokes for different folks. And just like the tree, after I Mod Podge this on, I take the 220 grit sandpaper, rough up those edges. Now that I have all the pieces glued on, sanded down to the way I want them to look, it is time to add the deer. Okay guys, you know these are Dollar Tree items, so the quality is not, you know, like huge. So these are so easy to pull apart. They're not even really glued together. You just kind of put your fingernail in there. Actually, some of them are already separating, and just pull them apart. Now, the problem is once you pull them apart, they are not completely flat because there's these little plastic pieces that go into each other. So you're going to have to cut those off. So X-Acto knife or utility knife or just scissors or whatever you have that you use for this kind of stuff to cut off enough so that it will lay flat when it's glued onto the tray. After I get enough cut off of it that I think it's going to lay flat enough for me to be able to glue it down on the tray, then I'm going to take some sandpaper and I'm just going to sand it, because after you cut on that plastic, it's going to be kind of rough, and sanding it will actually help the glue stick to it a little better so that it will actually stick better to the tray. Actually, before I glue the deer down, I decided to take Mod Podge and cover all the decoupage stuff with it. This way I don't disturb any of the paper when I glue the deer down. And to get it to dry quickly, I take a hairdryer to it. And now it's time to add the deer. I just had to decide which direction I wanted them to go. If I wanted them to be looking away from each other or towards each other. And I just thought it would look really cool to have them looking at each other. So I use hot glue. I actually use my precision hot glue gun because the tip is smaller, so a smaller amount of hot glue comes out, since it is kind of a small, more delicate item. Now, the problem that I had with this, even though I use X-Acto knife to try to flatten it and sand it, there is no way to get these deers exactly flat because their legs and their body weren't even with each other. So I had to add some extra glue behind the legs. And it seemed okay. Now, any spots that I found that had some glue in it, I did go back and I touched it up with paint. But a lot of the glue areas were better to leave them just with the glue than it was to add the paint, because it just was too noticeable. It made it look, actually it made the glue more obvious. I decided I wanted something a little extra added to it on the top and bottom, so I printed out Merry Christmas in green onto wax paper and then just laid the wax paper down and rubbed on it to get the ink onto the tray. If you have a silicone stamp, then by all means use a silicone stamp. You wouldn't be able to use a stamp with a wooden back because the tray is not flat around the edge. Now, if you were using a flat tray, of course then the wooden back stamp would work. Although I've been using the wax paper method for a very long time, I still make mistakes. So this time I let it move just a little bit, so it was a little blurry and I didn't like it. So all it needs is a little alcohol just to remove it, and then I can reapply it again. So I just printed out Merry Christmas again, but this time I just cut the word Christmas out and reapplied Christmas, and it worked just fine the second time around. Then I take a paper towel and I blot it just to get rid of any excess of ink. Now be sure that you don't move the paper towel when you place this over it. You can just put the paper towel down and just rub on it lightly, and that will remove any of the excess of ink. And then I blow dry it just to help set the ink. Since I made the decoupage paper look old, I wanted to age the rest of the tray too. I do it using inks. So I use black inks and I use brown inks. Now you can use the wax if you want to on this, the antiquing wax, that's fine. I just prefer to use the inks. Now, I don't use them on everything. Sometimes I also use the antiquing wax. I like using the ink because I can control it better than I can with the wax. You can apply the ink and wipe it off with just a damp paper towel, just like you do the wax, and it will come off. So if you feel like you've got too much on there, just wipe it back with a wet paper towel and it's fine. Now, I usually just take the ink sponge and just go over it wherever I want to age it. But there are areas that I can't reach with the sponges. So I use this Fantastics, and you can get those at any craft store like Michael's or Joann's or Hobby Lobby. And then I just dip it in the ink, and then I just go around to the edges that I can't get the foam pad to go into. Now the way I always use the ink is I go over it with black first and then with the brown. I just like the way it looks. Sometimes I'll add a little extra black after that or a little extra brown, but I just like having black first and then brown for the right age look that I want. I also apply the ink to the back because I want the entire tray to look aged. I want the back to look good too. It's important to me that the back of stuff looks just as good as the front. Well, at least almost as good as the front, because we resell the items that we make over. I also applied ink around the decoupage paper to help age that a little bit too. After I get the whole thing inked, I'll take a rag and I'll wipe it back a little bit to get rid of any excessive ink. Then I'm going to take it outside and I'm going to spray the whole thing with a clear finish front and back, at least 2 coats. And then it's done. And here is the finished project. like the video, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, share the video, and do a thumbs up. Until next time, guys, thanks for watching. See you then.